All right, go live. Looks like we're live, Jeff.
Hello there. How's it going?
Hello. Good, man. Good. How's the we'll start off with the same conversation as always. How's the weather where you are?
Well, I grew up in Hawaii, so I'm always used to 70, 80-degree weather, and it's cold in LA. And
Yeah.
it's only 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not that cold, but to people in LA, that's very cold. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's hot. It's hot here today. It's going to be in Sydney, which is, one state up from me. It's going to be like 110 degrees Fahrenheit on Saturday, and it's going to be pretty similar here on Friday.
wow, that's actually extremely hot. It never gets that hot in Hawaii, by the way. So a hot day
Perfect gamer
90
weather.
degrees, 90 or maybe 100, but barely.
Oh yeah. That's perfect. That's perfect. It's perfect gamer weather. It was like this like OG meme I remember loving that was, a person sitting inside saying, "Oh, it's too hot and sunny. Better play some games. Oh, it's raining. Better play some games." Like it's just perfect no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we got people coming in and joining. I've spruiked you up on the social media quite a bit about being a bit of a mobile gaming expert. So we talked a little bit before this, and for those people listening to the podcast or live on the LinkedIn live stream right now, know that I personally have been trying really hard to do a lot of research into the mobile market. But as with anything in esports, it's never ending, and there's so much to learn. So, we've talked about a couple of topics before going live today, and thankfully the topics you said that you wanted to talk about were even better than the ones that I wanted to talk about. So really, we're all here to learn from you today. There's so much upside in mobile esports right now. Like you were saying before in private, it's kind of like the wild west. There's so many concurrent viewers. There's so much good engagement rate. Seeing things like Free Fire in Brazil with millions of concurrent viewers, PUBG Mobile with 60 million downloads, and all of these big numbers. But I want some help from you today to, I guess, make sense of those numbers, and also for you to educate myself and the listeners what numbers matter and what should we really be looking out for. I've talked about this before. There's always some fluff in esports with people making unfair comparisons between, one prize pool of a gaming tournament that's big compared to one prize pool of a sports tournament that's not as big, but not taking into account the millions of dollars of brand deals, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd love to kick it off, I guess, with you just giving people a little bit of background on yourself and just talking about your company and what you do today.
Yeah, so background in mobile specifically is I was at Ground Zero back in 2014, which is actually not that too long ago. Vainglory actually pioneered mobile esports, and concurrently Tencent was also developing Honor of Kings, which came out in 2015. And I was a pro gamer in mobile esports. I owned my own mobile esports organization. I worked at like Hammers Esports, was a co-founder there, was a co-owner for Gangstars, and then worked at Immortals as their GM and head of mobile, and also Team Liquid on a mobile project where I feeded and took a team as the head coach and manager to South Korea. So I've done a lot of events, and not only was I a pro player, I've done all the hats: business development, mobile, pitching sponsorship. I ran a mobile gaming league. It was one of the first team-based leagues for Clash Royale. Actually, this was about 3 years ago when Mob Crush was a mobile streaming platform that sponsored the league, and also was a streamer for mobile. I've been a commentator for Clash Royale, Arena of Valor, Honor of Kings, and Vainglory. So I've done pretty much the entire vertical, and I'm very lucky and fortunate to have done it in such a short span of about 5 years. So I understand the entire ecosystem very well, and I worked with a lot of the publishers, the producers, ESL, NGE, World Cyber Games, and I've spoken a lot at different conferences about mobile esports, whether it's the Games Beat to the Sports Business Journal at the Esports Rising conferences, to X Live Esports Summit, and so on. So I've been really in the kind of in almost the entire vertical, so to speak. So I understand it from a player's perspective, from an owner's perspective, from a coach's perspective, from a production commentator's perspective, and also from a global league administrator perspective. And the other thing I want to add to that I'll share a little later is I also was at Ground Zero for PC esports. I grew up in South Korea back in 1999. I'm like dating myself. It's like another decade, right? And I lived there from 1999 to 2003. and I got to travel all over Korea and Japan and US, and we'll share some insights to explain why mobile is where it is now, and it actually has to do with a lot of parallels to how PC esports came to be in South Korea back in 1999.
For sure. So I guess let's start with the overall numbers of the market and part of what we talked about. I think it makes sense to start here and then let's pare it down from there. So there's a lot of impressive, massive numbers in the market right now, but I'm interested in learning from you. What's the growth like year on year? And the compound annual growth rate, if you've got those stats, that'd be fantastic. And also, what countries are you mainly looking at? Are there certain ones that are outpacing others with mobile gaming and esports?
Yeah, so it depends. It's going to depend country per country. And if you look at total mobile gaming market to esports, again, it's going to vary. Some mobile esports have kind of peaked and now are starting to decline, like Clash Royale is an example. But in terms of growth rates for the macro, so it's like esports, right? The macro is underrated, but there are certain parts that are overvalued and overhyped, I would say. So it's the same thing for mobile. But you look at countries like India to gaming, mobile gaming specifically, and gaming in general, India is the fastest growth for all of digital media entertainment, and explains why India, the esports scene, is literally exploding with a lot of engagement. I can talk more about numbers there, but it's growing about 33%, the fastest growing segment in India. And you look at Indonesia as well. You know, Cisco put a report out that gaming and the growth and the CAGR compound annual growth rate was going to be projected around 50 to 60%. And we see that with Indonesia, right? It has almost 300 million people and 200 million gamers, all of them who are very engaged in mobile esports specifically. So the growth rates are going to vary from country to country. Tencent is reporting, 25% year-over-year growth in mobile gaming revenue in general. But a lot of it is driven by mobile esports titles. So of course the mobile market is massive, but what we're seeing now is core multiplayer action games are starting to become the biggest, most profitable, and biggest revenue drivers for mobile games. And it's no longer the Candy Crushes that people always love to mention when we talk mobile. It's no longer the puzzle game. They still make a ton of money, but people forget that that's actually declining. If you look at Candy Crushes, they peaked in 2014 at 500 million monthlies. Now they're at 250. And the games that are growing are these core multiplayer team-based action games that I just talked about.
Yeah, okay. And I mean that seems to mirror the same with PC, right? Like we did some looking into it here for a client, and we were looking at, what games, let's say use Steam as a platform, what games will last for many years and what games have more of a likelihood to become larger and to generate more money. All three of those. And mobile just makes sense, right? You're playing against other people. It's competitive. People are purchasing in-game items and, boosts, whether that is pay to win or whether that is just pay for cosmetics. But it's much easier to keep you in the ecosystem. And what I talked to the Hi-Res CEO, Stuart Chisholm, about on a previous podcast, for anyone listening, I think it was about 4 or 5 podcasts ago, they said the same thing for them on PC. They only focus on multiplayer because one of the big things for them was, I think he said they spent something like 3 years developing an expansion pack for one of their games that was single player, and then people blew through it in 3 weeks to 3 months. And I said, well, it just doesn't make much sense. Whereas, if you're in League of Legends or Mobile Legends, you can release a new hero that takes you a little bit of time to release and to balance. But, that hero is going to be in the game for the next 10 years, like say in Dota 2, with heroes that were put in, or League of Legends has been around for a long time as well in PC. So, just multiplayer just seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, and the key is they're all most PC ports, and people forget that a smartphone is a PC. But if you look at total overall revenue growth, mobile is growing the fastest compared to PC and console. It's growing about 9% per a report that Newzoo just put out. Console is still growing. It's not like console is dying or anything. Their revenue is growing as well, and PC revenue is doing good too. They're all growing, but the fastest areas of growth is mobile, and specifically in the fast growing markets because of the advancements in smartphones and the access So it's similar to in South Korea where PC gaming just blew up. The early 2000s when PC gaming was in a fight against console gaming. I don't know if you guys remember those times, but Nintendo and Sony, they released like the GameCube, the PlayStation 2. It's the sixth generation consoles. It was the golden age for console gaming. And PC gaming was like this little guy trying to struggle to come out. And a country known as Korea was where PC gaming was basically cheap entertainment because of the PC bongs, right? Consoles were expensive. It was after the Asia financial crisis of 1907 to 1999. And because of the broadband internet access, which is the technology catalyst, along with cheap, like 50 cents to $1 per hour access to PC gaming, a lot of kids grew up. Their first multiplayer gaming experience was StarCraft on PC, right? They didn't play on console. And that's something that I realized growing up there. I was like, wow, what is happening? I competed in a lot of like sports tournaments actually, and did a lot of military competitions for the Far East in Japan, and traveled all over Japan and also US. And I saw console was like the big thing. But because of the economic conditions of Korea, PC gaming was actually a form of cheap entertainment. They were reeling from a massive crisis, the currency crisis, you name it. Korea was reeling. It was when I got there from Hawaii, blue skies, to Korea, gray skies. Everyone's depressed because the economy just sucked. It was not a good feeling. But everyone, when after school they were done, they were all congregated to these PC cafes, and because it was cheap entertainment, it was clearly accessible across every city in Korea and the dense cities. That's what led StarCraft to blow up and take off. If you look at what is the cheap entertainment of today, it's mobile gaming. It's similar to what helped StarCraft become what it is, because StarCraft helped us see the future. It doesn't get quoted often, but it was the first esport that was produced at a high level of production in stadiums, right? Back in the US, it was all like hotel ballrooms and gymnasiums with people bringing their own gear. That was really cool, but it was not the level of production that Korea did. And then because so many people played it in Korea, it got put on national television 24/7 on two network cable channels. And that is the beginning of a generation of PC esports there. And mobile is following a very similar trend line because of this cheap entertainment and accessibility that it's offered a lot of these people in fast growing markets.
There's a lot to unpack from there, but one thing that you said that I completely forgot about was about mobile gaming is kind of PC gaming ports. And for me, like you were talking about console versus PC, there was a time there, when I was finishing up school around the 2000, like the late 2000s, 2008, 9, 10, that every single PC game was a console port. And as a PC player, we felt like we were kind of second-class citizens. Most of the Call of Duty they were console ports to PC. A lot of the PC numbers were fast in decline before PCs became easy to build, or you could buy them pre-built or a good enough laptop. Everyone was going towards console, and then this massive flick of the switch happened, which maybe could coincide with Steam, maybe could coincide with easier and better to use PC technology. Where now it seems to be the opposite. People are releasing PC first, besides some games that are obviously Sony exclusive, etc. But PC is such a focus, and now you can often play the same game on the same Microsoft account across your Xbox and your PC as well. You said before that a lot of mobile games are kind of PC ports. Are they starting to kind of carve their own way out now, where everything is starting to become mobile first?
Yeah, I think it follows a trend. What mobile is showing us is simplicity is important. If you look at I'm going to share two macro trends just based on my experience playing RTS mobile and so on. Like RTS was the first genre, StarCraft 1v1, very complex, lots of units. And then League came out, which is free to play, right? They were like kind of cheap entertainment in that sense. And then you pay for skins, but they were mobile where you control one hero. So it was simplicity. And what mobile has done is take League, put it on mobile, and make the game even more simple, where instead of like a 40-minute game, it's 10 to 15 minutes. They have completely simplified a lot of things because that simplicity makes it more accessible to a lot of players. And you don't have to go, you can shop anywhere on the map in these games. You'd have to go to like a item shop shop at home. So there's a lot of these little mechanical things that they've done. And because of the simplicity of these games and the accessibility, that's why there's a higher percentage of females that play these games. The perfect example is Honor of Kings in China, where 54% of its 200 million monthly players. I'm sure it's declined since then, but they're females, and it has reflected in their esports audience. I mean, their esports audience is normally 60, 70, sometimes 90% of the audience in a stadium is females. So that to me just shows you that as a game developer, and to me, the reason why mobile is taking off too, and I don't mean to talk down on PC or anything, because they make amazing games, but I think mobile developers they're hustling. They release more content updates. That's why PUBG Mobile has more, not only more players, of course, in mobile, but it's more engagement at the esports level than PUBG PC, and there's more YouTube and game content viewing. And if you look at if you compare both the games, the roadmap for PUBG Mobile is much more exciting. There's a lot of events, there's constant updates, there's constant, collaborations. It's a lot more fun. And I think that's what makes mobile so great, is because it's growing. I wouldn't say it's competing with PC, but it's growing the entire gaming pie and helping more people become introduced to multiplayer action mobile games. And that's a good thing for the entire industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff you said in there. And one of the main things that I want to agree and to amplify is the importance of content. You've seen, for example, Fortnite. I think they announced they have over 100 developers now who are purely just working on Fortnite, making new content all of the time. And you see that versus, say, Apex Legends, who, when they finally, after 3 or 4 months, released their season 1, they only had one new hero. The map was the same. There was a couple of items. And you could see, the court of public opinion on Twitter, everyone saying, where's my content? I don't want to play anymore. I need more heroes. I need more skins. I need more things to do. And you compare that to TikTok. Jade Vincent, who most people watching and listening will probably know, TikTok influencer herself with 1.2 million followers. She makes 7 pieces of content per day. She makes 2 to 3 TikTok videos, 1 to 2 live streams. She's on Instagram doing posts and stories. She's on LinkedIn. She's on YouTube. She's on Twitter. And it's because you need to have that accessibility, and people just want things to consume and to do all the time. And it's no longer in the fact where you can just release an expansion pack every 3, 6, 8, 12 months, unless you're like The Sims and very long standing. You need to be releasing things all the time. And I think that's where a lot of people are learning from mobile. Say Dota 2, they went away from massive patches after big tournaments to a bi-weekly update cycle. Every 2 weeks, there's some sort of update that comes out, and then generally after the big tournament at the end of at every year at the international, there's one big update which released early December, November, which changes the game. But it keeps people interested. It keeps that content happening.
And I want to share an anecdote about that, because I didn't share this, but I'm working on my startup, which is it's for mobile multiplayer action games, where I want to help them connect easier, get on voice instantly, and just have a good experience together. Because a lot of players in the US are solo players. Actually, if you look at Asia gaming behaviors versus United States and West, a lot of people on mobile devices play alone. The percentages for single player is much higher than in Asia, where it's much more social. I think that foundation, that social foundation, helps supports the esports scene. But one anecdote, and I talked to a lot of users, in North America, and they can range from teenagers to 30-year-olds, etc. And a lot of them play console PUBG, but they're telling me now they play PUBG Mobile way more often, or sometimes even exclusively, because it has more cool stuff, right? They admit the control isn't as good as a physical joystick control, but it's good enough. It's pretty good. But the key is, like, they have cooler skins, they have cooler events, cooler content. And the other part is a social factor. Their friends play it, and some of their friends don't own the Xbox or the PS4, and there's no crossplay, right? Mobile, you can all play together. And I met people literally in Uber rides and Lyft drives, like just playing PUBG Mobile, and I asked them immediately to try to learn about their story as a user. And they always share with me, yeah, I used to play PUBG on console, but it's not as fun as mobile. I get that a lot. And when people talk to me about like PC or console, and they focus on the technicality of the graphics or the processor and all this kind of stuff, they forget that in the end it's entertainment. Like you just talked about. It's about content, it's about entertainment, and it's about social. That's literally what is the foundation for a lot of the success of these games and multiplayer environments.
Yeah, and like you said, the ease of entry, right? Like Dota 2 is the main game that I play these days, but fairly casually. But I started to try to play Dota 2 and I couldn't. I went to League of Legends because it had an easy entry level, and I ended up going back to Dota 2 because of the International 2013. It sucked me in. So obviously that marketing worked to at least capture me. So it's done well in that respect. But the path of a new player into Dota 2 is so hard. You got to learn like 110 heroes, and there's items, and some items deal damage under certain circumstances. Sometimes they don't, and the heroes are being updated all the time. It's just so hard to understand. Whereas if you can create that ease of entry, or something that I've talked about in some previous podcasts before, what makes Counter-Strike such a good PC esport game is because you can be a 10-year-old kid, or I think it's MA15. So a 15-year-old kid running down mid with a P90 and Dust 2 holding left click and have a great time. But if you want to be the best in the world, you're going to need 8,000 hours in the game. You're going to need to dedicate every single time of your life to it, because there's so many intricacies of what's the spray pattern of a gun. You don't need to know that to have fun, but you do to be the best. When the maps change, where are the skyboxes, where are they not? So you can do your pixel nades, and I still have in my head from when I played semi-professionally that, there were certain strategies on train where at a minute 27 on the clock, I would throw a flashbang at a certain pixel, and then 2 seconds later I'd throw a smoke and I'd check corner A, B, C, D. So it adds that depth, which makes a great esport, but at the same time, it's got that ease of entry. Does mobile gaming have that skill ceiling? Is that a concern for mobile games as they get more into esports?
Yeah, I think it has a significant skill ceiling, actually, because like when I would play Vainglory and I was the top, and in Clash Royale I competed and made it to the top 4 for a qualifier in North America. You're like the top 0.001% at that point, and it's definitely every decision and mechanical piece does matters, because the phones run, they still run a certain frames per second, usually 60 FPS. And every single second matters in a mobile game, and how you play with your team. You can argue the technical parts of that in terms of the mouse precision versus touch precision and all that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that, but the key is there is a clear scale of difference between different tiers. And that's honestly what really matters. It's not the technical of a mouse versus a touchscreen. If you look at like a lot of mobile pro leagues, they have like tier 1, which is like the World League. They have the regional leagues, they have their university, then they have campus. There's like the amateur, there's semi-pro, and there's a clear. When I competed with Immortals, I was the GM and head coach for the team that competed at the Honor of Kings in China, the International Championship Cup in Beijing. We played against the university, the best university team, the tier 2 teams, the B team, the backup team for the pro league, and then the pro league teams. And I can tell you right now, there is a massive difference in macro and micro competition levels across all 4 of those tiers. So as long as that exists, the esports is going to thrive. And that's the key part of understanding mobile, is people overly focus on the precision and all these things that just don't matter. It's more about the competition and how the best of the best can separate themselves from the 1% versus the 0.1%. And mobile has all of those same type of mechanics that support a competitive environment like that. And the last thing I want to add is the trend now is more massively multiplayer and more simplicity, right? Like that's why Dota 2 is not as big as League, because League is a more simple game, right? That's why League is not big as Honor of Kings, because Honor of Kings is a more simple game. And simplicity is the trend, right? More simple, still hard to master, which is important, easy to play, hard to master, and then more massively multiplayer, which is why we're seeing, battle royales and all these big, massive multiplayer games.
So we've talked about the MOBAs, and then you just mentioned the battle royales, and we did also have a question from Will Hershey from Roundhill in here. Is who's winning in the race of the mobile battle royale market at the moment, between Free Fire, COD Mobile, PUBG Mobile, and anything else that's kicking around?
Yeah, the thing about mobile is the question has to be qualified, so it has to be who's winning in what region. Because if you look at, so Battle Royale right now is a massive competing for basically territory and regional dominance, because once you capture a country, it's extremely hard for any competitor to enter. And the perfect example is what has happened with a mobile MOBAs. Like Arena of Valor is dominant in Thailand. but they can't touch Indonesia because Mobile Legends, which is made by Moontown, has completely captured the Indonesia, Malaysia, and Filipino market. And Arena of Valor is barely competing against them, right? Arena of Valor, on the other hand, has dominated Taiwan, for example, and other countries where Mobile Legends just can't touch them. So that's very important. It's a first mover advantage, and because once you get network effects and you have millions of users playing in a country, because you have to think about, like, put yourself in the pace of a mobile gamer. In the Philippines, they do a lot of micro tournaments. They do a lot of neighborhood tournaments, cul-de-sacs, you name it. It's very social, and if you're an incumbent, you have that protection, you have that defensibility, that moat. So Battle Royale is the same thing. Like, that's why PUBG Mobile is dominant in India and Free Fire is barely alive, right? But Free Fire in Brazil is massive, and then PUBG Mobile, you don't really see any PUBG Mobile over there. So it's basically a race to who can achieve a critical mass of gamers, and then you lock them into that by producing and make sure the game gets updated often, and so on. So that's what we're seeing, and first mover advantage matters a lot, and it's a region by region basis. But in terms of globally, like macro standpoint, I would say PUBG Mobile is winning. But I think Free Fire is a better esport because it's 50 players and it's a more simple form of battle royale where it's faster, much more action happens immediately. There's no like early scavenger phase that PUBG has. Free Fire is really a battle royale that's adopted to the mobile consumer. And I think that even though PUBG has more users, it's bigger than Free Fire. I think Free Fire has a much more engaged esports audience. If you look at it, PUBG Mobile Finals, they get around 200 something thousand, and they actually declined 18% in average concurrent viewers from 2018. So like their esports, they need to kind of tweak a few things. But you look at Free Fire, they peaked at 2 million viewers, and half that is their average concurrence. I mean, that's amazing for your half your peak viewership to be your average concurrent viewership of over 1 million. Is impressive because that's a game that's truly designed for mobile esports. And I think Free Fire will probably win the mobile esports side of things long term, and PUBG will win kind of the gaming consumer battle royale game globally, because it's currently leading right now.
Yeah, so I don't have the answer to this question, and we talked about this a bit before we started about metrics. What metrics make sense? Because there's always arguments. You know, I feel I've made some posts about it before and talked that there's sometimes unfair comparisons between esports and sport, where someone may compare the whole esports industry to the NFL, where the whole esports industry is not only just mobile, PC, and console, but it's also 30 games, you know, within. Or other people will say, you know, they're using subscribers or concurrent viewers, which is a metric that the layperson may understand, but it's not great for the business people to understand. What's your view with this on mobile? You talked about total viewership. You talked about total concurrent viewership or peak concurrent viewership. You also talked about retention rate. We talked a little bit about the rate of engagement of people as well. For you, maybe you could even split them into two categories. How do you explain this to people who have no idea what you're talking about? But also, what are the metrics that really matter to you that you're tracking for growth?
Yeah, for me, it's always the foundation. So I don't even look at esports initially, right? Esports is always the kind of the icing on the top. But for a mobile game developer, it's DAU and revenue. No matter what, if you can't support and grow those two key KPIs, then your game's going to slowly die. DAU is very, very important. And you can see PUBG Mobile and Free Fire have the highest, probably the highest DAU, 50 million daily active users every day playing it. And revenue, they both surpassed over $1 billion. So that tells me the foundation is healthy, because that tells me, and you can see both games, they're constantly pumping out content. I mean, you can have pets, there's really fun costumes, there's collaborations with anime to like pop culture across all these regions. That's very, very important to be relevant and stay competitive. And then from there, once you have that layer set, you then have to look at the esports scene and how they are driving it, how they're promoting it. The best is what PUBG has done with the PUBG Mobile Star Challenge, where they focus on their content creators. And then they have a separate competition for the Club Open, which is much more competitive, and it's not focused on around content creators and streamers. But you need to have an engagement strategy for both. And I think the key is like, even though esports, a lot of people look at esports like marketing, it is kind of like marketing in that sense, but you need to look at it as a long-term engagement tool, right? And like what Riot has done, that's why they have more viewers than they have players. That's the only game that has more viewers than players, which is amazing. So you need to look at esports as a long-term engagement tool to keep your most passionate fan base engaged. So those are the metrics that I look at. In terms of AMA is really not available in mobile yet, because again, you guys have to really think about it. Mobile is brand new. Esports is fairly new industry. Mobile just literally popped up within the past few years. So the only numbers that we are reporting are like unique viewers, total views, which is, you can take it for a grain of salt here and there, but it just tells us how big the potential could be. But the most important is always engagement. And we can kind of look at those by just following the stars of the game. So PUBG Mobile, for example, we have like one player called Mortal who runs his team Seoul. They're the number 2 team in India right now. They're the most popular, most followed team. Their engagement is insane. He himself has 1.1 million Instagram followers, and he gets 400,000, sometimes 200, but usually 400,000 likes and engagement and thousands of comments. So his engagement is very high. And I think that's what matters, because that tells you that there's real fandom there, and if you compare him to a lot of other tier 1 esports organizations, his engagement blows them out the water. I mean, they have much lower engagement. So these users on mobile are very passionate, and they care a lot about their esports players and their content creators. And I think that's a very promising thing for mobile esports long-term future.
Yeah, I mean, I did some posts about Instagram engagement rates, because you can use Social Blade to scrape that publicly, which is awesome. And looking at, Team OG and Dota 2, they have an engagement rate on Instagram of just over 6%. Flamengo Esports from Brazil, they were the best of anyone over 50K or 30K followers, sorry. At 240K followers, their engagement rate was around 8%. And, getting out of esports into more of the content creator realm, like Loud from Brazil, who's a content creator house and a community, I think they were pushing somewhere 15-20%. So 40 to 50% engagement rate is ridiculous for anyone to have, let alone someone of that size. So it seems really important. So the next question is then, how do you cross-reference or compare industry to industry? Do you look at the same numbers? Is it fair to use the same numbers to compare PC and mobile, monthly or daily active users, average concurrent viewers, and engagement rate?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison to make, but I think it's not a competing comparison. I think mobile gamers in general want to play on mobile devices, and it's a way. The big thing that I emphasize with people is it's not really competing with the PC gamer, because if you're a PC gamer, you're gonna continue playing PC. You may touch a mobile game every now and then, but a lot of these people are new to multiplayer action gaming. And it's similar to my story about Korea, where the PC cafes that existed introduced so many people to StarCraft and multiplayer action games. And that's what mobile is doing to an entire generation of Gen Z, right? Very young kids. And it normally is enough for them. Most of them, the mobile developers have done such an amazing job, along with also the smartphone technology, where it satisfies their need for gaming. It satisfies their core gaming need, because back then when smartphones weren't as advanced, you're not gonna if you want a core gaming experience, you go to a console or you go to a PC. And the biggest indicator I have of that is since the iPhone launched and the smartphone industry took off, console ownership has actually declined, right? They have never reached the same levels. Even though the gaming industry is growing from a macro perspective, console unit sales have not been selling as well as like the 6th generation consoles back in the 2000s, like PS2, for example, because a lot of people they're finding they're satisfying their need for multiplayer core gaming through their phones. And that's what's happening, especially in fast markets. So they don't really see a need to go to a PC cafe, because it's more convenient, it's cheaper, of course, and it fulfills my need to play multiplayer action games with my my friends and so on. So in terms of the metrics, we can look and compare overall, but I think What's the most important is from an esports perspective is staying power, because what we're seeing with certain mobile leagues is they kick off strong year 1, year 2 it normally peaks. Like Clash Royale peaked at year 2, they had like 700,000 concurrent viewers, and in year 3 it started to decline because the mobile game wasn't able to stay relevant or have as much staying power. So Clash Royale like peaked, I think, at 200 or 300,000 concurrent viewers. Arena, Valor, and MOBAs in general are starting to plateau, but it's still hundreds of thousands of average concurrent viewers, right? So it lends to the point where, to me, what's most important is what is the long-term play? Like, which game can hold like a sustainable number of viewers over time? And looks like honestly the best player would be Free Fire, PUBG Mobile, and Tencent's Honor of Kings in China, the KPL. Their growth rates have kind of tapered off a little bit, but their engagement and the number of viewers they're able to bring on has been very, very good. It's growing and it's not declining in any way, which is a good sign for mobile esports. And that has been going on since 2016. So they're now in their 4th year, and it gets better and better every single year. So
it's crazy. It's like, obviously we're talking the same language, but mobile gaming is just so big. It's something, to kind of wrap your head around. And it's interesting the discussion you say about consoles, because I guess in esports, besides Call of Duty, and Halo is coming back a little bit, there's not really much esports that's happening there. And it seems to me really that console is hyper focused on solo single player games, the Spider-Man releases, the God of War releases, and things like that. And judging by what you're saying with the trends and where things are going, mobile being online, communities, constant content coming out, updates, keeping in contact with the community, it sounds like where the console games are, they're going to have to start reinventing themselves fairly soon. Otherwise, they're going to continue to decline. And I remember there was a report I read recently which said the console decline has now evened out, and I think they saw a small growth this year, but it followed exactly the numbers or the kind of statistics or the general feel that you were saying as well, is that back when you couldn't have a PC, and a Nintendo 64 or a Super Nintendo was even more powerful than a PC, it made perfect sense to have a console in your house, but maybe not these days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, console is still a big industry. The revenue is growing, so don't get me wrong. But in terms of a percentage of internet users, that's the metric that I really care about. PC gaming and console are still big, but they're not growing as a percentage of total internet users. The only thing that's growing is smartphone gaming. This is a great research report pushed out by Global Web Index. And that's telling me that a lot of them are shifting over to mobile. It's not they're not saying I give up on console gaming. That's not the point. It's like Tencent has reported for the past couple of quarterly earnings report constantly is consumers shift to mobile. They're shifting to mobile. This is why we're growing 20 to 25% in mobile. And we are perfectly positioned as because a lot of users are gaming on their smartphone, and a lot more users are wanting multiplayer action games, and they exist on their smartphone. And that's Tencent's strongest. Tencent's like one of their strong competitive advantages in that area. So smartphone gaming has basically displaced PC and console, and it's going to continue to happen for the next decade, because if you look at the penetration rates for India, I mean, India is a huge market for smartphone gaming. They only have about 26% of their population have a smartphone. They're smartphone internet users. So there's going to be massive amounts of growth across the board, and with how developers will push the esports scene, that's what's going to boil down to. Similar to what South Korea did, they had the cable operators, they had SK, the wireless telecom companies, which is funny because they own the sports teams like SK, right? They own the stadiums, and they're like, what is happening here with PC gaming? Why don't we make this into a cool sport? Because it looks like it could be. And then that's how kind of stadium esports was born in South Korea. So now mobile is kind of learning from that and taking it to new heights in terms of engagement. But one thing that I want to make sure we focus on is a lot of the live events are not that big. In China, it's massive, right? They're selling out, 15 to 20,000 people stadiums, but it's similar to how esports like PC and console, you don't see like all of the stadiums being sold out for like the quarterfinals. or for like the qualifiers, right? They're not sold out yet, but it's getting more and more populated. So that's always a good sign. But you look at, like, for example, in Free Fire in Mexico, people don't know how big Free Fire is in Mexico, for example. They had their finals in November 4th, and it was a live audience of 1,000. But on the stream, they had a total of 55,000 concurrent viewers.
Yeah, wow.
So average concurrent viewers. So like the scene is still growing. It's still very infant, and the audience levels have not reached a level yet outside of China. Maybe Thailand is pretty strong, but if you look at a lot of the audience levels, mobile audience, live audience is not there yet, and I think that's going to take time.
And what about Android versus iPhone?
Yeah, Android, iPhone has always been the leader because it's the way that the phone is designed and its efficiency. When I was a pro player and all of the mobile pro players, they all played on iPhone. But what's happening now with like manufacturers like OnePlus and Vivo, right? They have done a really good job of optimizing their phones and working directly with the game publishers. So I remember the KPL when I was there in 2017, everyone was on an iPhone 7. And then now with Vivo sponsoring it, the tournament was now run on Android Vivo phones. And the phones are good enough. They actually, the KPL team and staff gave us the tournament phones for my team to train on, and they're just as good as iPhones now. So honestly, I think Android has closed the gap because they have optimized it. And if not, increased the gap, because OnePlus now offers 90 FPS, screen, but with a 90 hertz screen. So I think mobile will continue to move forward in that regard and offer a better experience from a frame rate standpoint. So I think the Android manufacturers get it. Apple, I came from Apple, unfortunately doesn't get it, but both manufacturers are just as good from a mobile gaming competitive standpoint.
Okay, yeah. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about was the buzzword of 5G. I feel like people use 5G the same way they use the word blockchain, where people would say, there's a new company coming out, it's fantastic, it's based on the blockchain, and that means it's really good. And you go, okay, what does that actually mean? And they go, I don't know, it's on the blockchain. And a lot of the answers I get from people is they just use the word 5G. They say, it's coming, it's going to be amazing. You say, why? They say, because it's faster. And say, okay, but why? Like, do people need it to be faster? Is it going to be cheaper? What's the cost per meg? And things like that. So for you, an expert in the space, like, what does 5G actually mean for gaming and esports?
Yeah, I actually talked at a conference, at a Hollywood tech conference on 5G and mobile esports. Awesome. And I was actually part of the Verizon Venture Studio program in New York City, where they were testing 5G back then. And this was like 2 years ago. They were testing it. And what it comes down to is it's a lot of, unfortunately, marketing speak. What matters is reliable connections that are fast enough to support the multiplayer mobile action games. And in countries like, Philippines, which is a bunch of, thousands of islands, reliability matters, and speed and connection matters. So 5G is going to be relevant much later once they're able to get the cost down so that the adoption rates can be higher. And if you look at the real world, right, theoretically, it can be as fast, less than 10 milliseconds or less latency, right? The latency is the biggest reason why 5G will push mobile esports forward and more competitive. But the real world test that they're conducting, it's not even close to what the theoretical is. And that's going to take years for them to figure that out. I think right now it's a lot of marketing speak. And honestly, as a mobile esports gamer, I don't really care about 5G. All I care about is reliable and unlimited data. And if you look at mobile games, they're not, it might help with like download speeds. So most mobile games are like 1 gigabyte. Free Fire is like a couple hundred. It's not relevant to mobile esports yet. But once it reaches that point, then you can see a lot of innovation around having these mobile esports competitions actually be mobile, where you don't rely on a Wi-Fi network at venues, where you can actually have these competitions literally on the go. So I can see a lot of potential there, but I think the biggest impact is going to be to AR and VR, where mobile technology, mobile chipset, if you think about the mobile phone, it is the PC of our generation, right? the future next generation consoles will be AR and VR wearables. So wearable technology is they're being derived from mobile phone technology. Consoles were derived from PC hardware and technology. So the future consoles of 2020 in the next decade will be wearables. And that's where I see 5G and the wearable technology making a huge difference. And it's going to shift the industry a little bit. And we're going to see some very creative, there's already some interesting things happening with AR and VR esports, but we're going to see it take another upgrade and evolution within the next decade from 2020 to 2030.
Where do you see most of the innovation happening at the moment in the mobile space? It seems like a lot of people are creating very similar MOBAs to League of Legends, even the art style. A lot of people are creating very similar games to, say, PUBG or Fortnite Mobile. What do you see coming next? Are there any emerging trends of different styles of games that aren't battle royales or MOBAs, or are taking things completely differently to the rest?
Yeah, I think the main innovations will be if you really think about technology and what technology helps us do, it helps us interact, it helps us be more social, multiplayer, sports. And we see that happening with PC, consoles, phones. What's going to happen, what I see as the future for innovation is what is it going to help us reflect more of the physical world. And what I mean by that is like VR, AR is a perfect example where you're not confined to sit in a certain space. You can actually reflect more of a human experience where you're in an arena. So there's already, it's called, I think, free roaming arenas. There's already in China, they have those VR arenas where it's like an open gym. It's a VR gym and it's an open format, and you put on the VR equipment and then you play these multiplayer games together. I actually got to meet the CEO of Battle Times and went to their headquarters and got to experience some of those games. And yeah, these are like the free roaming VR arenas. Those will be the future because it mimics real life, but you're in a virtual reality, right? And I think that is the future innovation. And mobile is going to drive that because it's all mobile. Like you're literally moving around and you're out, and you need mobile technology, 5G to the chipsets to drive that. I mean, Huawei just announced that they're able to actually have ray tracing on their mobile, on Qualcomm, on their processor. Like ray tracing is possible on a modem. Yeah. And the reason why mobile phones cannot reach that level yet, because they have to be customized like a wearable, like a new generation console, because of thermal requirements, right? The reason why smartphones don't like throttle up or throttle down is because they're thermally throttled. So if you build a device that can really take advantage of these powerful mobile chipset processors and so on, where they don't have a thermal limit, then yeah, the sky's the limit, literally, because it's going to really change how we engage with the world when it comes to AR, VR. So, and that's something I've been following very closely. Because if you look at like how mobile technology has changed how we interact and how we interface with technology, like Apple and the iPhone X and smartphones have done a really good job with touchscreens. They talk about spatial consistency. They talk about all these that lead to a much more intuitive experience that PC gamers and PC hardware just doesn't think about, right? Like touching a screen and thinking about spatial consistency and how that makes sense from a human experience is what these mobile forward-thinking companies are thinking about. And spatial consistency is going to matter a lot when you think about AR, VR, and the future of innovation in esports and gaming in general. So that's what I'm most excited about, for the next decade. But right now, it's all about adoption. I want more gamers to play on smartphones, so they grow up gamers, and then when these new consoles come out, they then will purchase it. And the good news is, I think the prices will decrease, where it will reach a mass adoption. Facebook is subsidizing the Oculus Quest dramatically, but the Quest is actually a big step forward because it's wireless. You don't have to connect to a PC or whatever, and it's run by the Qualcomm 855 chipset, which is about a 3-year-old smartphone chip, and it costs $399 for a all-in-one VR experience and device, which is subsidized. Yeah. But the good news is it's a pretty good experience. So imagine what's that going to look like in 5 years. What chips are going to be used? Imagine like when Apple enters a space, like we're going to see like the next decade is going to be an amazing time for gaming and entertainment in general.
There's another great comment here in the LinkedIn Live, and there's a few. Peter Perez, Chris Mancini, Troy Linforth, all in here chatting. Kieran John, and John Helms. But another good question from Will Hershey that I didn't think of asking, and he says, do you think that COD Mobile has paved the way for AAA publishers to port their IP to mobile? And I guess adding on to that, do you think that's going to be something else that's coming more in the future? Like we've seen League obviously announce some mobile stuff, but do you see other of these AAA, Blizzard, Activision, EA type developers getting into more mobile?
Yeah, they have to. If they want to make more money and satisfy their shoulder, they're going to have to. I spend a lot of time. I'm in Facebook groups with Call of Duty players from North America. These groups are 10,000 to 80,000 people. I like get into a group chat with them and play with them and ask them a lot of questions. And these are actually older than me. They're millennials or older. Surprisingly, a lot of females, and they play mobile Call of Duty Battle Royale. And the reason why they decided to try the game is because of the IP. Is they grew up playing Call of Duty. And a lot of these gamers, like the Call of Duty, I don't know the data, but I'm willing to bet that it skews a little older. The people might think a lot of kids play Call of Duty mobile, but what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing across all these Facebook groups, and I've seen surveys they ran and post, like tell us your age, and a lot of them are 20 to 30 years old, like mid 30s. Okay. So yeah, the brands that are smart will need to port to mobile because it opens up another medium for them to engage their consumer because they're too busy to play on console, or they don't no longer have a console, right? And they grew up playing that title, and now it's free to play, accessible on their mobile device, and they're now re-engaging with that IP, and now you kind of resurrected a customer. Honestly, that's why I look at it. They grew up playing Call of Duty, they no longer play it. They're busy with life and work and so on. And because the mobile version comes out, it's easy to download and access, like just a simple app download. You kind of resurrected a customer for your business, and I think that's super important. And every developer needs to do that. And more importantly, for United States and Western companies, they need to get on mobile because the best mobile developers and engineering talent is in China. So what are we doing? We're outsourcing a lot of our mobile dev talent for Tencent to then, and they're amazing. Like they're the best engineers, which makes sense. But that to me is worrisome because that means that we don't have a good understanding of mobile game engineering and development. We're just outsourcing it to China.
Okay.
Right now we have the lead in IP, right? If you look at the macro trend, US companies, all the best IPs came from the United States. StarCraft, Diablo, League of Legends, Call of Duty, you name it, amazing IPs. But what if Tencent closes that gap? What happens to these Western companies? I think they're going to be put in a really tough spot long term, and they need to think more strategically from that perspective.
So what's coming up next for you?
Next is I'm working on my startup. I'm actually advising a few like tier 1 esports orgs and other companies in the space with mobile and so on. But for me, my startup is, we're learning. We just launched. We learned a ton from, a couple hundred users that came on, and we're kind of doing a re-release and focusing on that market that I think is ignored is that mobile gamer that's mid-core to hardcore. They're a mobile multiplayer action gamer. I think that audience size is dramatically increasing across the world. So I just want to build a solution for that user base and help them connect to each other. Because when I was in Vainglory and Arena of Valor and all these mobile games, there is a strong community there. And we still stay in touch with each other. And we met through a mobile game. Like, who could imagine being close friends and having such a strong community around a mobile game? And I think that sense of community is just as strong as any other community in PC or console. And I think that mobile is often just underrated and overlooked consistently. They think that these people aren't hardcore gamers or they're not passionate about the mobile games they play and the players that play it. And I'm kind of going against the grain there and saying that they are. And I've experienced it with my time and insights in that industry. And I think this is a community worth pursuing and building something great for.
Awesome. And there's been a few call outs in LinkedIn live chat to to follow yourself on Twitter, and I have been for a while too. There's a lot of great information coming out there. So where's the best place to find you online?
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter. That's where, and my Medium. You know, I'm actually writing an article talking about smartphone and the future of smartphone gaming, and it's not for reasons people are going to think. So I'm excited to kind of release that before the end of this year. And so Twitter is always the best. That's where I really amplify or tweet out specific metrics about mobile esports and what's happening in mobile gaming. And I share a lot of thoughts and analytical pieces as well. So Twitter would definitely be the best place to follow me and stay in the loop.
Fantastic. Well, this is one of the shorter LinkedIn lives and podcasts that we've done, but I think that's because my brain is so full of information. I need to go take some time to process this. There was a funny comment the other day. It was like a Joe Rogan podcast. He had this old strength trainer from the Soviet Union on, who's very well decorated and well known as one of the best, lifting coaches in the world. And one of the great comments was, the shorter the podcast, the more important the guest. And it was pretty similar. I think that podcast with him was only like an hour 20, but damn, my brain was so full of information. I've already listened to it twice, and I'll probably go back and listen to it again. And similar with this one here, Jeff. So your wealth of knowledge, and it seems pretty obvious to me that mobile esports is growing. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but also it seems to be the future. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, mate. And thanks to everybody who's listening in to the Big Esports podcast, as well as those who are tuning in live to LinkedIn Live now. We'll have plenty more of these coming over the next few weeks. Thanks for listening, guys. See you later.